Right, week 4 is the end of 1 Point Away, and it's a kind of grit, resilience, commitment, character week. And I am very delighted to introduce somebody I'd call a friend, Brigadier Darrell Amerson, who, apart from being chairman of Army Tennis and having done some amazing jobs in the Army, particularly with training of the Army in the future, also is an erstwhile doubles partner with me, and we've had the odd famous ecstatic victory, Darrell, and we've had the odd agony,
indeed,
famous defeat.
Indeed.
Yeah. So just for everybody watching, just kind of who are you and what have you done in the Army, particularly recently in training?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So I've been in the Army for almost 30 years. I can't believe that. But as you say, I've had the privilege of doing some really interesting jobs. And just currently, for instance, my job is about capability development for logistics in the Army. So thinking about future trends and the lessons from operations training and experimentation today is very interesting, because that feeds our capability development work. Prior to my current job, which I started in January, I worked at Defence's, let's call it colloquially, Defence's think tank, which focuses on futures thinking, concepts. I was head concepts there, thinking about the implications of the changing context of the world in which we live, looking at some of those future trends to work out really what are the implications for the way the defense force, the armed forces must fight and operate in the future. So fascinating work for 3.5 years. Prior to that, I was commanding a logistic brigade, quite heavily engaged in 2014 in Afghanistan, doing the final transition of the counterinsurgency operation in Afghanistan, which was fascinating. And a whole host of jobs prior to that, including platoon commander at Sandhurst in the 90s, which was a highlight. I've been an instructor at our Joint Staff College in Shrivenham, and also I've instructed majors on our Majors Staff College course as well. So I've been very fortunate, Mark.
Fantastic. So I know, without, as they say, blowing smoke up you are a top officer who's done some amazing instructor jobs. You know your way around the tennis court. You're passionate about the game, being the chairman and devoting many hours to the sport and being a tennis partner to me. And you don't know, but you are one of the people that, until I did this training, invented the training, I would always fear, because you glide around the tennis court without apparent effort and smack the ball like a howitzer. And that, to my mind, in the past would have been, you're too talented for me. I'll just throw in the towel right now. Perfect intro, really. So the context of this discussion is that, and there couldn't be anybody better to ask. The Army, for decades, if not centuries, has turned ordinary human beings into extraordinary human beings when it really counts, at critical moments and under pressure. And they didn't rock up at the gates as officer or apprentice like that. The Army did that. So what I want to pry is, how did the Army turn kind of the great unwashed through to knowledge, and then skill, and then automaticity, i.e. this is who you are under pressure, and it just happens. And if we could decode that, that would be amazing.
Okay, I'll try to. Let me just, I mean, it's really interesting, actually, that I think, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, that they are a profession in which, and this is a good thing, it's a profession, actually, in which the time that you are actually fighting and operating is a relatively small percentage of time of the whole career. And if you compare that to a lawyer is operating every single day.
Very good point.
Is operating every single day. A soldier is not necessarily, and again, it's a good thing, engaged in combat every day. And that probably is self-evident. And what really that does, Mark, is place a really great store, therefore, on training, individual and collective training. Because if you're not on operations, the focus really of any commanding officer or soldier is training. And I think there's a framework which can help us here around, because training really is linked to competence. And by competence, I really mean ability, I think.
Yeah.
So there's a framework.
And that varies depending on what type of theatre you have to have competence in.
Indeed, that's very true. But I think there's a baseline of competence, and you're right. You then have to refine that according to the particular circumstances you're in. So I think there's a framework around competence, 3 C's, if you will: competence, character, if you will, ethics, our values and standards. So character, competence, and commitment. And really by commitment, I'm talking about, you mentioned the word grit. I think that's an interesting word, but that sense of resilience and determination when the chips are down. So I think there's something about character, competence, and commitment that is really important within the armed forces. And sort of touching on your point about, you know, how do you get to the point where we're taking some, you know, ordinary people, you and me, ordinary people, and yet extraordinary things can happen on the battlefield. How do we get to that sort of point? Well, there is absolutely something about, I think, the way we train. And I think this is a really important point for tennis. And, you know, as you say, Mark, you know, we've had these discussions over many years, but it's about the specificity of training, I think. It's about the context in which you're training, the purpose that you are training for. So we are really clear in the Army, when we train, we're really focused on the objectives. What are we trying to achieve? The objectives. Because, and I have been on many tennis courts, and I'm sure you have as well, Mark, where I've gone on thinking I'm going to train. I'm going to practice. We tend to use the word practice, don't we, in tennis?
Yeah.
We don't really use the word train. We say practice. So I'm going to practice. The truth is, there is no purpose to that practice. I'm sort of hitting balls up and down. There is no purpose. There is no feedback. So one of the things we have in the Army, and we're really focused on, is specificity of training, those objectives. What are we trying to achieve? But we're really also focused on experimentation, and we're focused on feedback. We call them after action reviews.
Okay.
So this importance about feedback, I think, and analysis is really important. Now, don't get me wrong, you can overanalyze, you know, and we don't want to do that, but it is important that we have feedback. Why is feedback important? Because we need to learn. And the thing about training in the Army, it's about learning. We're not always going to be successful, but through the after action review process, we can learn about the tactics, techniques, and procedures that perhaps didn't go as well as we might have expected, but we can learn from that if we have a growth mindset, if we're open-minded, and let's be brutally honest, use failure as a springboard to get better and improve. And I think, certainly from my experience on a tennis court, Mark, I can think of so many occasions when I've gone on to practice without a purpose, with no feedback, and quite frankly, it's been fruitless. Yeah. I've enjoyed the fresh air. I'm not at the, you know,
You've had a good time, you've enjoyed yourself, but pointless.
And when time is short, if you are focused on getting better, I think we can be far cleverer about the way we train on a tennis court. So, you know, perhaps, you know, come back with another question, but I think this point about training, specificity of training, objectives, after action reviews, and this critical open-mindedness, you know, the growth mindset that says, I'm open to new ideas, and if I don't succeed, that for me is a springboard to be better. It's not a threat that I want to avoid, and I'm just frightened of going there. You know, we are encouraging our soldiers to be innovative, to experiment. I want to introduce you to a couple of interesting terms, Mark.
Yep.
So this point about we may only be operating in our or operating and fighting in a conflict for a very small percentage of our careers, 1, 2, 3%, and hopefully we never have to do it. So what we have to do in our training, we create the conditions that we call surrogate warfare. So surrogate warfare is about creating as realistic a condition as possible for that gladiatorial fight and context, such that, you know, that soldier, when he's in that situation on the battlefield, Mark, it doesn't feel so out of context that he can't respond in that intuitive way that you've described. So at the heart of this, at the heart of it, are those baseline skills and drills. You know, that's the basic backhand, the basic forehand, the technique of the serve. It's the basic competence, isn't it? To be able to get
basics done meticulously well.
We call it skills and drills.
Okay.
So low-level skills and drills, the ability to shoot straight, you know, the ability to use the ground tactically, you know, the ability to live and operate in the field, the basic level of competence. But then we build up the complexity and the context, surrogate warfare with a live adversary, a free-thinking adversary. That's exactly what you have on the other side of a tennis.
Yep.
A free-thinking adversary.
You don't have somebody that's compliant.
Exactly that. Exactly that. Now, you know, you can build up to this. We have a progressive program, but fundamentally, when it gets to the higher levels of our training competence, it's about surrogate warfare with a free-thinking adversary, such that we are putting ourselves in those stressful positions where we need to make those quick decisions, Mark, working as a team to hopefully be successful. And we can then transfer that into that operational context.
Perfect.
We don't have to, but if we need to, we can.
Perfect.
So I hope there are a few insights there.
No, it's absolutely perfect and luckily consistent with. It might be consistent because you've helped me since day one. Training is hard though. So how do you train commitment to keep going when everything is screaming at you to stop?
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think this is where I would draw on a couple of the other C's. Because if you think that training is building competence at an individual level and a collective level within a platoon, a company, battalion, etc., you know, the truth is you've got to have a mix of competence and character and commitment, haven't you? Because we have all seen, Mark, those brilliant tennis players that you and I know would wipe us off the court, but actually they don't, because they've either walked away from the sport or actually on court, maybe they're lacking character or they're lacking commitment. Or we've seen great players who just haven't fulfilled their potential. Maybe, you know, not always because of a lack of commitment or character, but in some cases, I think that is true. So I think we have to match competence with character. And what do I mean by character? You know, what is it that keeps somebody going? I think there is something about discipline as an individual, doing the right thing on a difficult day when no one is looking.
Oh.
Can you pass that test?
Oh,
doing the right thing when you're having a very difficult day and no one is looking. That's the ultimate test, isn't it?
It's amazing insight.
So there's the character. Are we, you know, when the chips are down, are we going to cut the corner or are we going to stay true to ourselves? And hey, we don't always get it right. And I'd be the first to admit that. But, you know, that's what we're trying to achieve in our soldiers. And, you know, we don't always get that right. And this point about commitment, grit, as you called it, determination and resilience, really, really important in soldiering, really, really important in any sport, the determination and resilience. I think part of that is an individual point that goes back to character, but I think part of it is about this sense of loyalty for the team.
Oh,
really, really important, you know, the trust and the loyalty for the team. And the truth is, two soldiers next to each other in a fire, in a trench. They're not fighting for the flag, Mark. You know this. They're not fighting for the Queen or country. What they are doing is fighting for each other. They're fighting for each other. They're fighting for their mates. This sense of, and it's the same on a doubles court, isn't it? You and I on that doubles court, Mark. We're fighting for each other, and we don't want to let each other down.
But it also touches into the extra emotion and pressure when you're playing for the Army at Wimbledon against the RAF and Navy, it is for you rocking on court and just playing a singles match. The pressure and the emotion is double or triple. Exactly
that.
So we as tennis players around the world also, and it's one of our mantras, need to create team of experts and supporters and people that hold you to account, because when you cross the white lines and you're playing for team, not just yourself, it's better.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there's another interesting point, and you actually touched on this earlier on. You made the point that we have this basic level of competence, but then we need to have the ability to adapt, depending upon who's on the other side of the net. We adapt in the army. Is it a counterinsurgency campaign? Is it a UN operation? Is it defense engagement? Are we about to fight something that looks like a conventional conflict? So this sense of adaptation. Are you playing a left-hander? Are you playing a right-hander? What's his or her strength or vulnerability? Same with the doubles team. So this sense of being able to adapt, I think, again, there's a very significant crossover here.
Awesome. So that's the segue into the last kind of question, really, which you've already answered, which is, as extraordinary as Army, military, and other professional people are at performing, raising their game under pressure, it doesn't translate that the same person come on a tennis court and also know they can and will raise their game under pressure, because you need domain expertise and specificity, as you said.
So sorry, Mark, I missed the essence of that. Sorry.
You can't just automatically translate who you are, know what you can do under pressure in the military.
Yes.
Bring that onto the tennis court. It doesn't automatically go.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And again, I put myself, I'm probably a good example of that at times. We've had some of those losses that you mentioned, but, and I think the point is, it's the specificity of the context, and it's the specificity of the activity that is so important. So are there some transferable skills? Absolutely. So I think character, commitment are absolutely transferable, but the competence, you've got to match that with the competence and the specificity of training. And I know in my tennis career at times, I've lacked that specificity of approach, Mark, which you are bringing to this through Big Point Player. That specificity of approach, I wish I'd had this sort of discussion and friendship, with you 30 years ago, because I think I might have been 10-15% better on the tennis court, because my approach has not been focused or approached with the purpose that I think it should have had. So I think specificity of purpose for me in context is really important. Yes, some things you can move across, but there's a specificity to everything that we do.
Thank you. And lastly, you've had an injury for a while. You've had commitment and resilience to keep going.
Yeah.
What's your tennis objective for 2019?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I mean, as you say, I struggled with wear and tear knee injury since 2015.
Whoa.
4 years. Deeply frustrating. What I'm working on at the moment, again, with some advice from you and others, is functional fitness. And to be honest, Mark, my goal this year is to get on the court, to start hitting with purpose, but to just get to the point where I'm not breaking my knee down every time I get on the court. So I've got to do that functional baseline of fitness to make sure that my knee doesn't break down. So hopefully this year, if I can get on court and my knee holds up, I can take things forward from there.
Fantastic.
Great, Mark. Thank you.
Carol, thank you for your time.
It's been great, Mark. Thank you.
Absolutely great insights. Thank you very much. And I'll see you on court and
Definitely,
hopefully
Mark.
be alongside you rather than against you.
Absolutely. You take care, Mark. Good to speak to you. All the best.